Well, hello and welcome to this ODI lunchtime lecture. Thanks for coming. My name's Becky. I'm in the production team here at the ODI. And it's my pleasure today to introduce today's lunchtime lecture, which is by Sebastian Wilson, he's the Director of Hankin Consulting, and he's the delivery lead for Google Cloud at HSBC. And today, Sebastian will be talking about how technology is used in the finance sector and how customer data is used for insights, decision-making, and improving online journeys. Just some housekeeping. Please, could you turn off your cameras and mute your mics for now, as we're going to be recording the session. And we'll take questions at the end. Could you please submit your questions using the chat function? And then after the talk, we'll get you to unmute your mics one by one to ask your questions. Otherwise, I can ask the question for you if you prefer. But for now, over to Sebastian. Thanks for Sebastian.
Afternoon all, hope you're well. Let me share my screen. Can you hear me okay? Give me a nod, Becky, if you can hear me okay.
Can hear you loud and clear.
Brilliant, thanks. Hi, thanks for joining myself and listening to me for the next 15-20 minutes. As Becky kindly introduced me, I'm going to be speaking about what's happening in the finance sector and how generally we use data, and just also about technology trends within the sector. I'll be covering my career path to date, how I got here, AI ops, AI, a little bit of ML, but everything is obviously all focused and underpinned on data. So before I jump into my talk, I'll talk a little about myself and how I got here. Let me just ping to my next slide. So I've been in the city for around 20 years. This is a very short summary of my, my technology rap sheet. So I did a computer and business degree at Brunel University. I then worked for the Queen's Bank Hermes Pension Management for a few years as an Oracle database administrator, an Oracle Apps database administrator. Before moving to Ernst Young, I was an Oracle DBA, SQL Server, and Infomix DBA for 4 years. I also was a product manager and project manager at Ernst Young. I then scaled and carried on working through UBS, ICAP, and JP Morgan, all in very core coding, Oracle, SQL Server, Infomix roles, Microsoft roles. I then, within those roles, I was always scaling and continuing on my journey from being a techie, but also taking on management roles. And generally, I was the person that was pushed in front of management to give the bad news when batches weren't working. I then decided to retrain as a project manager. Did my I'm trying to think what I did now. My PMP and my Sigma and those qualifications a number of years ago. And then I walked into Carphone Dixon's and retrained again to be a product manager, where I launched apps for Carphone Dixon's. I was working in a team which was supporting an application called Pinpoint, which was then used in all branches. I know there's been a little bit of a change on the high street, but at that time, you would walk into branch and it was an application that you was able to compare your usage of minutes, text, and voice against your network and phone, and it would give you at any one time the best deal for your needs, because at that time Carphone had access to around 1,200 different tariffs per day, so it was really quite a bit of a minefield for the customer service representatives in store to actually really have a think and gain their lens of what they should be providing to the customers, and also giving that commercial viable lens as well from back office. I then joined HSBC around 4 years ago as a contractor, and I'm still a contractor there at the moment now. And it's been an amazing nearly 4 years. I joined as a transformation manager, moving a lot of services, products, and people from high cost to low cost, from say Sheffield to Bangalore. And I worked on that program for 2 years. I then moved into artificial intelligence, which was last year, and I ran the first proof of value of an AI ops environment within the money laundering area of HSBC, Financial Crime and Regulatory. And then moving me up to where I am right now in 2020, being the delivery lead for the Google Cloud project within HSBC, within the CMB Commercial Bank. So you can see my trajectory, which some of you have already asked for. I've got a few pings and emails of how did you actually get to your role. It's very much there in front of you. It's been a long struggle, but a very enjoyable one. So let's just talk about technology at the moment and things I think that you should be aware of if you're not, given this is the Open Data Institute. We've got huge technology advancements at the moment, from IoT, AI, which I'll go into a little bit later, payments, which is very dear to my heart and myself, because obviously within investment banking, how can we leverage blockchain? How can we leverage payment and cloud methodologies to improve processes, cut costs, speed up the time to market, and also improve customer service? It's all very much the same themes of what we're trying to do. We're trying to do things faster, cheaper, but also improve. Sorry, it's my kids shouting in the background, and improve how we're able to deliver to our customers. So we have changes massively in customer behavior too. If I think about how my mother at the moment would always like to go to branch to deposit a check. But if we look at the likes of our competitors like Monzo and Starling, great startups, they definitely pivot and they definitely do things in a different way in relation. Well, they're very much all app based, as opposed to going out and having customers go into branches. The barriers to entry for the people getting involved in the financial sector without a banking license are definitely lowered, because we all do have access to the same technology. We don't have the same leveraging from a price perspective, but we do have access to technology in the same way. So that means that's enabled the likes of Monzo to scale and to really start to challenge us. And there's a lot more challenger banks out there that are doing very well in this sector at this time. I definitely find FCA regulation sometimes a bit of a pain, but it's obviously necessary. I also find that they're generally behind what's happening in industry at the moment. So it's very important that we are on the journey with the FCA, because obviously they're there to safeguard a lot of the solutions that are being prompted in the financial sector and being used for you all. At the moment, I think the playing field for technology, data, OSI stack, whichever way you want to look at it, is huge. There's so much access to information, and there's so much want within the technology sector, whether it be from the data level all the way to the front serving customer level. From an AI standpoint, there's just so much more investment. It's the likes that smaller startup companies, smaller startup AI companies can gain vast amounts of seed money from angel investors. So it's definitely a great time to be involved within data, within technology, probably more so because we're now starting to crystallize a lot of the promises that have been around the financial sector, around the data sector for a number of years. So technology, it definitely can be here. It definitely can help us as a company, as a global company, and myself as a director tackle some of the biggest challenges in the financial sector. So what's going on right now at HSBC? HSBC are hugely data rich. They have 150 years well, they've been around for 150 years, and they've got stacks and stacks loads of customer data. What we're trying to do, and what a lot of the areas are trying to do within banking just generally, not just HSBC, is use that data to create analytical output. What are we going to do with that analytical output? It will change the way in which all sectors or all industries or all parts of the technology advancements at the moment will interact with yourself as customers. And that's absolutely huge at the moment. Being able, let me bring this into context for you, and not just for banking, but if I think of from a restaurant perspective, if they're able to collect what you eat when you actually go into said restaurant, what time you go into that restaurant, who you go in with that restaurant, they'll start to be able to offer you services, offer you products, offer you discounts, all around using that data to create strong analytics to start to predict their customer behavior, or start to shape offers and customize offers through CRM systems, customer relationship management systems, to ensure that you have a better relationship with that restaurant, or you have a better relationship with that financial sector. You won't be basically having conversations from a standing start. They'll be using what's basically been in the background to create real value products for yourself. Artificial intelligence is definitely the key to a lot of things at the moment, and the key to the future of technology. Moving forward, artificial intelligence is still very much granular with the zeros and ones, and a lot of people are talking about how how is AI actually moving the dial forward? Well, at HSBC, which I'll show in the next slide, we definitely have chatbots which start to simulate that conversation that we have between yourself and the machine, to basically make it more human-like, to enable you as a customer to gain the information you can quicker without sometimes having to go all the way through to a customer service representative. And also, if you're a HSBC customer, you already use AI with My Voice is My Password, which is openly available. I'm trying to think if First Direct do it too, I'm not too sure. Machine learning, again, underpins what I was saying before about creating the creation of those value products. I can't underpin how important it is to have machine learning sit on top of the data, to start to plow your data lakes, to plow and go through and to create those insights, to create those trends, to give the people at the front office that insight. So when you come into branch, they're again talking to you from a continual standpoint, not starting the conversation from the start. What's next for computing and data? Borderless computing, digital identification. Cyber is at the forefront of everything from keeping your data safe, data privacy. So let me just underpin some of those. There's definitely constraints and issues, definitely constraints and issues with having access to data in the UK, to having access to the same data in, say, South America or China. There are definitely constraints where you will have to log on to different systems in different ways, even for the same corporation. And if we are able in the utopia world to have one login for everything, that would start to remove the barriers that we have, where we have, let's just say, an Alibaba cloud strategy for China, but then you would have a Google cloud strategy for, say, the UK and Europe, because of restrictions from borders for different regions, for a multitude of different reasons. They definitely impact you having that seamless journey between if you travel as a HSBC customer or as any other banking customer from one sector to the other. So if you're able to remove the borders, you can then look at your digital identification and just have that as your passport, as you do where you have one passport across all of your digital technology standpoints. And a lot of those would underpin and improve your communication and improve how you log on and how you don't log on to certain systems. But at the same time, we have to keep your data private. We have to. Nobody wants to know that their data is on the open market for sale. So data privacy, to create that utopia world that I spoke of, is imperative. And at any one time, there are always people trying to steal that data. So cyber is very high on the list. But again, as Robert says at the bottom here, problems are definitely not stop signs, they're guidelines. So I know there's masses and masses of people, a lot more smarter than I, working on restricting cyber attacks and how they're modeling and creating different models to do that. But at the same time, if we can reduce the attacks on cyber, we can hopefully promote and improve our data privacy, so then we can unpick the borderless computing and just have that one digital identification for you to progress on your journey through cyberspace with your data. So I did mention it before about chatbots and biometrics. What are they for? So if you log on to HSBC website, you'll definitely see a pop-up come up on the left-hand side. It's been there for quite a while now, and it'll ask you what questions you would like to do, and it will start to funnel your questions down. I'm sure the majority of you would have seen it, if not on HSBC's, but your other apps. And that at the background is machine learning, or that is AIs, and all that information that is being gathered is being used to see what you would like as a customer, or what your region would like, or what your street would like, or your area, or your county. And it starts to change the representation of data of what you see when you log on to said service. This is not just for banking, this is for everyone. But ideally, if I know, and I'll go back to my mother as an example, she would like to deposit a check and she wants to find out how to do that, maybe by going on and asking that question 3 or 4 times, because she may not get the answer that she wants the first time. HSBC then know, okay, this person needs this advice. Maybe we could help and promote data, or promote what is seen on the basic homepage when that person logs on. That's not happening at the moment, but we do have the chatbots to enable help and funnel that information through to the right person, so we can gain that insight once you get through to a customer service representative. So ideally, you're improving customer service, you're improving engagement, and you're monitoring your customers' data to basically gain that insight. Ideally, that's going to improve generation and lead generation of products, and also save both yourself time and the vendor and the institution of which you're basically interacting with at the said time. So that's from the front side. If I flip down to the back side of data and AI, we can talk a little bit about AI ops, because I did mention that I did a proof of value last year. And while we have, I said, customer centric at the front, how is AI looking at what it can do to suppress alerts, or not suppress alerts, report alerts in the right way? So AI ops, artificial intelligence operations, as said here, it's really there to look at the number of alerts that are coming from real lower level in the operational stack reporting systems, from BMC Patrol to Moogsoft to Big Panda to Splunk. And what they're basically doing is they're looking at the alerts that our data engineers receive on a daily basis. And what they're doing is they're bringing those alerts together to create a common theme, again, to put the machine learning and create a trend to ensure that when the person receives that phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I did receive those phone calls, and back in my earlier days when I was a database administrator, it wasn't just, we've received 5 alerts from this system, you need to check it out. It's a case of, we've received 30 alerts across all of these systems. It's creating this picture, and this is what we need you to do, and these are the systems that you need to look at, and this is what we think the action needs to be for you to address this current solution in hand. So AI ops is really looking at back-end infrastructure and looking at how it can infiltrate and absorb itself into the technology stack to reduce the number of incidents and reduce the number of calls that are happening to our service individuals that are doing those night shifts, our DBAs, our coders, our network guys. And AI ops is relatively new. I looked at this and I said I worked on this in 2019. It only really came onto the Gartner standard chart a few years before that. So it's a great sector to be involved in if you want to stay ahead of technology, just the same way AI is as well, generally. So I'll go back to the customer lens, because I think, and how data is used, because I think this is my second to last slide, so I'm starting to wrap up now. Data drives analytics, which drives the insight, which empowers our regional managers to branch colleagues to make the right decisions at the right time for all customers. Again, if I am a regional manager and I'm working with my agricultural customers, I can basically not just give those guys packages or those customers packages that are for their needs. We can start to look across the area, across the county, and see what other customers are basically taking on. And we can start to give that depth of level of viewpoint that our regional managers are basically crying out for, to give the personal products to our different managers. And by having that information, we can tailor it towards the customer at any one time. And it gives them that 360-degree view, which is imperative. The ecosystem of data, I think it's important not just to look at the data that is currently held internally, but it's also looking at the data that is held externally by third-party companies, which are great to basically bring that 360-degree view together, but also at the same time, look at what's going on in market trend. I think analytics as a service is imperative for all organizations. Everybody wants insight, and it's using what you already have as opposed to buying it in. Integration, technology is always, well, I wouldn't say as always, has generally been seen as something outside of sometimes the management structure. But if you look at the C-suite and the top of the table at the moment, you'll have your CIO, you'll have your CTO, you'll have your CDO, and you'll have another CDO. And some people ask, what's the difference? Well, you've got your chief data officer, then you've got your chief digital officer. And it just shows the importance now that people are taking on gaining that insight, that they've now split those roles between CTO, CDO, and chief digital and data officer. And business integration and the pillars between the two everybody needs to work more cohesively, from productively, to basically drive that insight that everybody needs for that business outcome of increasing the bottom line. And culture and adoption, you couldn't say it anymore. If everybody's on the same path and everybody's looking at this in the same way, it's going to be absolutely brilliant. But again, there's a lot of fear generally to change. And I would implore you all to just take your view and to take your lens of how you can be empowered, how you can move the dial forward, and what can you do at this time to ensure that you're a change maker, because it's here and it's happening, and it's better to embrace it at times. There's generally a lot of fear for change and adoption, but it doesn't need to be here. It's here to help us improve as all. So that's me. I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn, or my email address there, or Twitter. So if there's any questions after this, or you wish to connect, I said reach out, and I'll pass back to Becky, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Start my video. Thanks very much, Sebastian. Start my video. Yeah. No, my video won't stop. Anyway, hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, thanks for that. That's really great. Hannah, I know you've asked a question. Would you like to go first with your question?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Sebastian. That was really interesting. From the customer point of view, which was your sort of final point on the last slide, yeah. How do you sort of proactively get feedback from those customers and who are experiencing the changes that you're making, and how then do you loop that back into making improvements on the service?
Yeah, there's an incredible amount of feedback loop. So we have to listen to our colleagues on the ground. So our branch managers, our regional managers that are talking to our customers. We collectively, I mean, I don't monitor these channels because I'm not in marketing, but there's Twitter channels, there's YouTube, there's Facebook, there's LinkedIn. All of this basically creates a massive information of giving us what our customers want, where they're experiencing pain points, because our customers are very, very vocal, and they will use the channels just as everyone else does. So it's a case of listening, gathering all the information, finding out which area it needs to go to. I work in commercial banking. It might be totally different from our retail partners, maybe very different from our private banking partners, but everybody's listening, and it's gathering that information and ensure it's funneled to the right person to address those needs.
Thank you.
Thanks. We've got a message from Colin, who said he'd be interested to hear any thoughts you have around consumer attitude to data sharing, with increasing consumer awareness of the power of their data, positively but also negatively. So how do customers feel about sharing data? Are people happy to, or are they quite reticent?
I honestly, wow, it's a brilliant question, and it really, I don't think at the moment there's a general consensus. I think there is. Okay, it differs so much depending on who you ask. Obviously, we had GDPR, which came into force not too long ago, but I don't think there's a global view or an overall view of yes, I'm happy to share data, or no, I'm not. A lot of people are very private with their data, and rightly so, because we've seen different cases of how it could be used. So to answer from a consensus point of view, I'm not really too sure, but I know as a paramount, it's we do our best not to share, and we do our best to keep it as private as possible. We're not, I would never say we're vulnerable to attacks, because I know HSBC is attacked on a daily basis from lots of different cyber terrorists that are trying to extract that valuable information. But going back to the front point to answer that, it's quite a difficult one. I don't think I can give a concrete answer. I'm going to have to give that some thought and come back to you.
Thanks. And we've got a question from, is it Giles? I think, if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah, that's Giles.
Hi, Giles.
Hi. I'm sorry, maybe it's a very high-level question, but I was wondering, within everything that you're seeing at HSBC or as a consultant, what are those, elements that are symptoms of continuous trends, and what are the things that are definitely disruptive and that will call for drastic changes in big organizations like HSBC, for instance?
Symptoms of what, Giles?
Sorry?
You said symptoms of what?
Symptoms, in fact, what you've been describing.
Yeah.
Some of the things you've been describing are, in the continuation of what was happening before. It's just faster, broader, etc., etc. And there are some changes that are, in my mind, disruptive. There is a question following maybe about chatbots. Yeah. Chatbots is something which is definitely changing the way we are interacting with the customer. So for me, it's disruptive, and we can see that on the contact center, it brings more. It brings a different kind of organization, the way you interact with the customer, the way you organize the shift of the teams, etc. So, are there other disruptive way of using the data that you can already see that we should anticipate and maybe build upon new way of doing businesses, especially in retail?
Well, okay, so I think, now tell me if I've answered your question right. So I think if we look at the different trends of technology that are being embraced across the sector, they are definitely going to change things internally. It's what is adopted and what is rolled out on a use case per use case perspective. They're definitely going to have changes. So chatbots, as we spoke about earlier, that's definitely one. It was very much a no-brainer. There was a lot of research behind it, but it was not a no-brainer. There are definitely changes to the application function if you use HSBC, where you can now have your statements already in the app. So they're all changes which reduce your interaction, let's say, with the branch, which would obviously then have a knock-on effect of looking at the branch and possibly how that branch is going to be used. So if you think of changes to the app to statements, and you can now use your credit, you can now use your app to deposit a credit or check. You possibly will go to branch less, then you would look at the usability of that branch, you look at the people there, and you may deploy them to other areas of the bank or other areas of the network. You may close that branch down, which has an impact on retail and cost of that retail place. So there is an impact for everything, and not so much a domino, but one thing does impact another. Chatbots would change shift times, AI ops would change, let's just say, maybe the number of calls which amass from BMC patrol levels at the bottom all the way to when a person's called. You may then look to have different shift patterns for who's online. And also then looking at how the data is used, you can then look at certain products of which have been made or which you thought were very challenging and compelling and think, I don't think anyone's using them in the same way, because you start to measure them and say, maybe we should withdraw these products and we need to pivot into these products, and they would need more of development, or they maybe need less development. So there are lots of change makers on lots of different things within technology which will have an impact both from the front end, back end, and bottom line. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks. And I think Anwar had a similar question. Anwar, has that been answered, or would you like to ask that still? Well, the question was, I think he's still muted, but how do you see the our new one here? Did you encounter any surprises when using AI features through the chat box?
I wasn't close enough to that. Okay, so the front end one, I wouldn't be able to answer because it's before my time. For AI ops, which I did, absolutely shed loads. And I'm trying to think what I can say and what I can't say because obviously it's personal, but I realized that you really need a strong data lake to help you give that predictive. You need a data lake to basically mine your data, which will help you with your future predictions. I'm aware that certain AI ops vendors do chat and connect to your existing data lake. Some of them don't. And so that was a surprise. Cultural adoption was definitely one of them. There was generally quite a lot of fear of this is going to reduce our time of being on call and just reduce our teams. But tech-wise, with data lake projections, how it reported out, it definitely needs to have more symmetry with your help desk systems, whether you use Jira or whether you use ServiceNow or whether you use Remedy, whichever your service systems use. There needs to be a lot more integration, which I found, which was definitely a struggle. I hope that answered for you, Anwar.
Thank you. And I had a question about the one digital identification. When that is cross-border, does that does that introduce risks with different data regulations across the world? Like, what are the risks when it sort of crosses those borders?
Definitely does. So and that's part of the massive challenge at the moment. When you go, I mean, we use our computers in a borderless way, but our data, to access the same systems, you may not be able to. So I cannot use Google Cloud in China because they don't use it. Obviously, Facebook has its own restrictions, very simply. So it does bring in massive challenges, and there's lots of regulation where data can be shared in one region and it can't be shared in another. And there's also lots of regulation of customers not wanting to share their data too. So it proves a massive, and probably the regulation definitely overpowers the technology. The technology is already there. It's the regulation, which rightly so in a lot of instances, ensures that data is just not available to everybody everywhere. Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Thank you. Any more questions? There's no more in the chat, but does anyone want to say anything before we wrap up?
I've got another question. Sorry, me again. Has open banking influenced any of the activity that you're doing, or changed the way that you're doing it?
It, not directly to me, but definitely for the sector it has done, 100%. With the ability to connect via API to different banks within, I'm looking at the HSBC app, and you can obviously then bring in your accounts from different areas, the way you can switch accounts now. Some of the promises to switch in 30 days has had huge impacts and implications, where I think it was something like 2 or 3 months it used to be to switch bank accounts. So that's definitely made it better for the customer. It's probably made it a lot harder for the financial institution. So it definitely required a lot of development back in head office or back in the delivery teams to ensure that happened. So yeah, AI open banking has made it's again something that's lowered the boundaries. It's enabled someone to switch from HSBC to Monzo and vice versa a lot easier. The question is if they want to, but yeah, it's helped.
So yeah, so I think we can wrap up now. Thanks very much for joining us, Sebastian. That was really interesting and really great answers as well to the questions.
Thank you.
And yeah, the recording and the audio and video recording will be available for people who want to watch later. And we're just getting some thank yous in the chat.
Cheers, guys.
Okay, and yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
All right, all the best. Have a great weekend. Take care.